American modern Orthodox thinker, Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik. It's an incredibly fascinating essay that he first delivers as a speech in the late 1950s and almost becomes prophecy 10 years later in the Six-Day War, where Soloveitchik uses the metaphor of the Song of Songs, the 5th chapter. In the book of the Song of Songs is Judaism's great unrequited love story, right? Where it describes a lover and a beloved who for about, was it 6 chapters, 8 chapters, can't find themselves in the same room at the same time. Like, oh, the way Jews would tell a love story, right? So they're basically like wandering around different parts of the city and can't find themselves in the same room at the same time. The closest they get is in the 5th chapter, when the beloved is now in bed and the lover is knocking on the door. And if you're reading the book and there's like a building up tension, and you're reading, you're like, get the door. Like, stand up and get the door. And the voice is knocking, kol dodi dofek, knocking on the door. And by the time, it takes about 4 verses, by the time the beloved gets up from the bed to go to the door, by then the lover has given up and left, and then they're wandering the city again. So the whole story is about the inability of these two people to find themselves in the same place at the same time. And classically, the religious tradition read this as a metaphor for the Jewish people and God. That they're constantly incapable of reconnecting in this love story between a people and its mission, or a people and its purpose. Soloveitchik reads that to say, the state of Israel is God knocking on the door of history and saying, it's time to resume this relationship of the vision of what this was supposed to be. We're supposed to reacclimate to being a people connected to God and pursuing out our story in the world. And it's actually, like, theologically a fascinating read of that book, as if, like, the state of Israel provides this opportunity for the Jewish people to solve its historical problem. And it means that I'm not judging this moment on the basis of whether it's good for the Palestinians. Tell me, has this been good for the Jews? And it's a beautiful text. This is just an excerpt of it, but he says, he identifies 6 knocks on the door. First, it's undeniable that the establishment of the State of Israel was an almost supernatural event. Second, militarily, this is the second knock. The victory of the small Israeli defense forces over the overwhelming Arab armies was a miracle of the many in the hands of the few. Read down to the 5th. The 5th is that for the first time in our exile, since our exile, divine providence is teaching our enemies that Jewish blood is not free for the taking, right? Our ability to stand up for ourselves. And 6th, that every Jew who yearns to escape from persecution in enemy lands knows that he can find a safe refuge in his ancestral land. You go back to Buber, Palestinians don't appear anywhere here. I'm not actually interested in evaluating the success of this project on the basis of whether it's been good for the world. Forget about the Palestinians. No cancer drugs appear in this one either. The question is whether the Jewish people have resumed their own story, which would signal the success of this messianic particularism. I would venture that you know a lot of people for whom this is the imaginary framework with which they understand the state of Israel. You might be disappointed sometimes with its policies or its behaviors here and there, but there's something radically changed with the Jewish people's re-entry into history in the 20th century that holds a sway over you. The religious version of this is called religious Zionism. The secular version of this is what I'd call like mainstream classic American institutional Zionism. Hadassah, AIPAC, a number of other organizations like it, where the project is defined by the reconnection of the Jewish people to its mission and purpose, independent of the universal mission and purpose.